following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle Athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern Athletics this past week. A lot of road action. A lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, our first edition for the 2022-2023 athletic calendar year. It's officially turned the athletic calendar page. Colin Lacy alongside the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, fresh off his escapades out west.
You went somewhere as well.
I did, but mine was a lot closer and a much shorter trip. But we will dive into that a little bit later on this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Because it is the first edition of Inside Eagle Nation for the athletic calendar year, there's been some, not necessarily big news, but big changes in the Sunbelt Conference.
Yes.
Since the last time we spoke, and it was just last week. But because July 1st has come and gone, that means the Sunbelt Conference has 4 new members for James Madison, Old Dominion, Marshall, and Southern Miss, now the Sunbelt Brethren.
Welcome.
I don't know that they're watching, but
they might be. I know we got some rabid fan bases that just joined the Sunbelt.
Yeah.
Which, that's the reason why this works so well, because there's a couple of theories that conference realignment has. You can either go get a media market, or you can go get where the fans are, where the programs are, where the passion lives. That's what made Georgia Southern and App State so attracted to the Sunbelt back in 2014. Similar formula was followed, going to Huntington, West Virginia, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Harrisonburg, Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia. Now, Norfolk is, of course, the biggest market.
Yeah.
But to be able to bring in programs that have had a lot of success in a number of different sports. This is football-based, but we have schools that have had a lot of success in a number of sports, not just what happens on the gridiron, but that's the one that we're going to get to talk about first.
And diving into these teams, there's been a lot of success against each other. You've seen ODU and Marshall have some pretty good matchups. Georgia Southern and Marshall, Georgia Southern and ODU. A lot of interconference, which is now interconference matchups in the history with these teams. We're going to dive into this week a kind of overall look at what these teams and what these programs and athletic departments as a whole bring to the Sunbelt Conference. We're going to touch on all 4 of these this week and kind of give you a history, give you a little bit of what you can expect from not just football, but kind of the overarching athletic programs for these 4. You can get your questions for any of these 4 or anything along with Georgia Southern Athletics by commenting here on Facebook Live or tweet us at GS Sports Network. Before we dive into that, a couple of news notes to get to for Georgia Southern Athletics. One coming out earlier on today that Jeff Cordy is going along with Alan Beck up to Western Carolina as an assistant coach. You and I have talked about it a lot, especially on the broadcast, how much Cordy in his 1 year here at Georgia Southern really meant to this program, especially the catching side, which obviously everybody knows is near and dear to your and I's heart.
Correct.
He is somebody that is going to be a absolute star in this business of baseball coaching, and a huge congratulations to him as he takes his next step along his career.
Yeah, I would expect not only Western Carolina's catching to be really good among Southern Conference schools next year, but he's got a really good sense of offense.
Yeah.
To be able to guide Kyler Holtgren, J.P. Teig, and for a while when Sean White was playing before he got hurt, to be able to have the kind of success offensively, but then also that 3-headed monster, what they gave defensively, that's a huge asset that Alan Beck now has at Western.
That is going to be one heck of a offensive team for Western in the next couple of years with Alan Beck and Jeff Cordy up there. Who, buddy?
I would think that at some point the Catamounts would be coming back to Statesboro. I don't think that Rodney's going to have to push really hard to get Alan to come back because he's been back and forth a little bit. They haven't officially moved to Cullowhee yet. They still have to close some things out. But I would anticipate seeing them on the schedule sooner than later. That doesn't mean they're going to be on for 23 for sure, but I would anticipate them. And I mean, for Rodney, it's a little bit personal anyway. We know that he played there, he coached there, was the head coach there. His name's on the stadium.
So it's Hinnon Stadium.
Yeah,
so.
you would think that would happen sooner than later.
One other news note in Georgia Southern Athletics this past week. A couple of football games added to the non-conference slate. South Carolina State, a home game in 2024, and then North Alabama added to the home slate in 2026 for Georgia Southern football.
And part of the influx of non-conference games, Georgia Southern had 2 spots they needed to replace with Liberty slated to join Conference USA. That means they needed that slot for a league game, so Georgia Southern had to act relatively quickly, and we know that some of these are scheduled 5 and 10 years out, but to get those filled, that at least takes care of this now, even if it happens to be an issue down the line like it was with Liberty, because I think it was 24 and 25 where it was going to be Statesboro and Lynchburg.
Again, with July 1st come and gone for the start of the 22-23 athletic calendar year, you've got 4 new teams in the Sunbelt Conference as of right now: JMU, Marshall, Old Dominion, and Southern Miss. We're going to dive into this week kind of an overarching history, some characteristics of these teams, what you can expect when these teams come to Statesboro. Georgia Southern heads to their respective places. We'll start with JMU. And again, you can get your questions in on any of these teams. If you've got a question for a team we're going to do a little bit later this week, go ahead and get it in on Facebook Live or tweet us at GS Sports Network. But we'll start with JMU. A little bit of the history. They're nicknamed the Dukes, came from their second university president, Samuel Page Duke. They were a charter member of the Colonial Athletic Association back in 92. Was once an all-women's college, founded in 1908, which I didn't know.
That's right.
And had a strong history of women's sports beginning back in the 1920s. Admitted the first men and started men's sports in the late 40s, became fully co-ed back in the late 1960s. Their AD, the names sound a little bit familiar. Jeff Bourne, their athletic director, has done a really good job in his tenure up at JMU. He is the uncle to Christian Bourne, director of baseball operations for Georgia Southern Baseball.
This is a move that James Madison has thought about doing for about a decade. And you got to go back to a coach by the name of Mickey Matthews that led them to their first national championship. He spent some time as the D coordinator at Coastal Carolina. But he saw the potential in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and how that school and that town work so well together and the successes they've had in football. I mean, they won a national championship in 2016 as they have really become the North Dakota State that's not the North Dakota State. It's pretty much those two guaranteed to occupy 2 of the semifinal spots at least when you're looking at the FCS playoffs. But with the way that they have continued to grow, they come into the league. They've got the biggest athletic budget in the league now.
Yeah.
And Old Dominion's in second. If that shows you what exactly the league is getting, not just in terms of passion fan bases, but they've also got a little bit of green to them. But for James Madison, they've had a lot of success, not just in football. They had a national championship appearance just a year ago in softball. They've had a lot of success in field hockey. Basketball was really good in the 80s and 90s. They've been struggling to get back to that, and we can speak to that a little bit more because our old buddies Mark Byington, John Cremens are on the men's basketball staff, so he'll get a chance to make his return to Statesboro. We'll, of course, go to that beautiful Atlantic Bank Union Center up in Harrisonburg, just opened this past year. It is absolutely gorgeous. They won a regular season championship during the COVID season in their first year in the Colonial. Got a little bit sidetracked this year whenever the Colonial came out and said, well, you're going up a level. You're not eligible for conference championships anymore. It became a contest of sorts. And then they end up finishing below 500, but still the ability to get the talent up there from a men's basketball standpoint. Football-wise, Kurt Signetti is the head coach. He has been insanely successful. They've lost 5 games in 3 years. They've been infused with transfers, knowing that they're going to make the move up. Now, they have lost some guys in key places, but a name you'll recognize pretty quickly. Jarius Romanek transferred there from Arkansas State, and I would think you could pencil him in at one of the spots, either at corner or safety, because he played both out in Jonesboro.
Yeah, and it's a JMU football team moved from D3 to 1AA in the 1980 season. 1993 became a part of the CAA, twice the NCAA, 1AA or FCS national championships. You mentioned the 2016, also won one back in 2004. They've made 5 NCAA tournament appearances on the men's basketball side, and you talked about opening up the Atlantic Union Bank Center in the fall of 2020, a huge huge addition to that athletic program. And it's an athletic program that women's basketball has been a really good sport for them. They became, back in the 1920s, one of the longest running women's basketball programs in the country, the third longest running in the NCAA. They've made 11 NCAA tournament appearances, and they're one of 3 NCAA women's basketball teams with 1,000 wins.
I did not realize that.
I didn't either until earlier this afternoon. But when you're one of 3 women's basketball programs to do anything, you're doing pretty well.
Baseball-wise, head coach Martin Eichenberry has been there for a long time. He just got a contract extension not too long ago. They had one of the top prospects in the country this year in Chase DeLauder, an outfielder who could also pitch a little bit. He did get hurt and didn't put up the stats that I'm sure he would have wanted to. He was sizzling at the time of the injury, but somebody that here very soon is going to hear his name called in the MLB draft. I want to say that's sometime in the next couple of days. But this one is okay, and we could say this for any of the 4. There's a lot of football history between these two if you go back in the 80s and 90s. Yeah, a lot of football history between these two.
This is one, and I know you feel the same way because of a lot of the same reasons, but this is one that I really like because I love to see teams jump from FCS to FBS and have success like Georgia Southern did, like Appalachian State did, like Coastal Carolina has done. Being able to see that success, and you look at the last 3 that we mentioned, all coming to the Sunbelt, now you've got JMU trying to do the same thing. That's something that I think could be a really big storyline because this is, and there are some that make the jump from FCS to FBS that you know it's going to take a couple of years, but this is a JMU team that I think can come in, and their AD, Jeff Bourne, put out a letter, almost like a Benko briefing that comes out here at Georgia Southern, put out a letter on July 1st whenever they were officially in the Sunbelt Conference and said, look, this isn't a move that we made for years down the road. We expect to be competitive in pretty much every sport right now, and I think that's an opportunity they have.
They are going to have to deal potentially with what Georgia Southern dealt with in 2014. You're not going to be eligible for the Football League Championship yet. You could still be named a champion, but you would not be able to represent the East Division. Now that you have 14 teams with the 7-7, they would not be able to go or host a conference championship game regardless of how things are going to work out. We already mentioned the amount of money that they have. When you move up, that's what you need. You have to have that investment, whether it's already having it in stockpile or finding a way to creatively generate money, which is kind of the camp that Georgia Southern has been in with the construction of the IPF, with the Hill Convocation Center. That's where Georgia Southern is trending towards. But in what James Madison's framework has been to already have that kind of budget, they've opened the new basketball arena. They're about to have major renovations at softball for a program that probably needs a pick-me-up. They did have a death on their team this season. They are recently off of a national championship appearance, but to have that kind of positivity infused as a sidebar to what they've already done on the football field, I would anticipate them having a lot of success in a number of different ways as they join this league this coming year.
One final note, they do have 5 athletic national championships. 1994, they defeated UNC in field hockey. That's a sport that I hope that we're up there on like a Saturday for football and they play field hockey on Friday because we're going to go. 1995, they won the NCAA archery championship. 2004 and 16, as we mentioned, with football, and then women's lacrosse, a 2018 national champion.
Bridgeforth Stadium is not a facility we're going to visit this year because James Madison will be Georgia Southern's homecoming opponent for 2022, but we'll get a chance to travel up to see the new digs for basketball. Baseball-wise, that schedule will be announced relatively soon, but being that one of the 3 teams in the East, the new teams in the East, are the Dukes, we'll get a chance to see quite a bit of them.
Next team joining the Sunbelt Conference for the 22-23 athletic calendar year, Southern Miss, the Golden Eagles or the Lady Eagles, depending on which team you're talking about. And I didn't realize they had gone by as many names as they have. They began as the Tigers, then they became the Normalites when it was Mississippi Normal College. They've been the Yellow Jackets, the Confederates, the Southerners, and now finally the Golden Eagles as a student and alumni vote back in 1972. But football-wise, have won 2 college division national champions, and it's been a while. 1958 and 1962. Won 3 of the first 4 Conference USA titles when they joined Conference USA. Ray Guy, an alum, Brett Favre, an alum. Frank Zolkowski tried to find Brett Favre the entire time he was down there for
I don't think he found him, though.
Yeah, I don't think he did either.
Okay.
But men's basketball, 3-time NCAA tournament appearances, the NIT national champion in 1987. Women's basketball, a really good women's basketball program. They were Sweet 16 back in 94, one of 10 NCAA tournament appearances. And baseball is a team that you hear about a good bit, but they made their first College World Series appearance back in 2009, and they are a team that just this past year hosting.
Yeah.
That's a really good baseball program and a lot of good traditions for Southern Miss.
I don't know how much of them we're going to get a chance to see this year because they are the lone team that's going to the West, and they joined South Alabama and Troy. Well, Troy officially going from the East to the West, so they're going to be in that camp as well. But one, you mentioned Ray Guy. That's a South Georgia boy born in Swainsboro, was an All-American at Thompson, played a number of different positions before going to Southern Miss. I can't wait to officially meet John Cox, the great radio voice of Southern Miss. He's been there for more than 4 decades. I know that a lot of guys in the league have met him because Southern Miss has been on a lot of team schedules in a number of different sports, so it feels like they've been a de facto member of the conference anyway. Getting them in officially, this one was more because of that, but all of their Conference USA tie-ins and all those rivalries, they're all in the American now.
Yeah.
So it's as if they were on their own island. Unfortunately, they've seen a dip in football. That was a fantastic tradition that they had for a long time. You mentioned Brett Favre. They finished within the top 25 just over a decade ago. Back in 2011, they finished 19th in the country. They've slid quite a bit. Their recruiting has dipped a little bit. That is a crazy fan base. They love their football. So you merge Statesboro and Hattiesburg. If we get a chance to play them a lot more, I think that that's something that's going to be able to see. They call their football facility The Rock. So that's a natural tie-in with Appalachian
Does it need a
State.
crack?
It might when Georgia Southern goes there.
Okay.
But the head coach is Will Hall, somebody that's coached in this state before. He was at West Georgia, also been a coordinator at Louisiana in Tulane. He talks the part. I think it's a matter of time. They've struggled for a number of years. And with football last year, the reason why they had so much difficulty, they have a quarterback.
Yeah.
They kept getting guys hurt. They ended up having to put running back Frank Gore Jr., yes, Frank Gore's son, is going into his final year at Southern Miss this year. So there's a chance that he may have to slide in and play quarterback full-time unless he can be his natural running back. Men's basketball, they've struggled for a while, but baseball, I am jacked to be able to see them as much as we do. Scott Berry is the head coach there. He has done a fantastic job, played them in a non-conference series back in March of 18. Southern Miss.
It's been that long.
Yeah, because Seth Schumann hit for himself.
Yep.
That series, he's the last Eagles starting pitcher to hit for himself. They swept the series, but 2 of those games were decided by a run. They were the first one to make the move, and I think they made the most sense because of where they're situated geographically. You can really see the separation with the East and the West, but then just how many teams they've already played in the league on a yearly basis.
Yeah, and this is one that the Sunbelt footprint grows geographically with adding JMU, ODU, and Marshall. It grows and expands a little bit farther east. But this is one that I think is a no-brainer because just geographically, easy for me to say, it is right smack in the middle of the Sunbelt footprint, and it would almost seem weird if they weren't in the Sunbelt this year.
Won't get to see them on the football field in 22. But I just wonder, because a lot of the talk lately, when I'm going to use the Power 5 comparison, with the SEC expanding, with the Big Ten now expanding, and with the Big 12 and the Pac-12 maybe merging, there's a lot more attention on do you go to 9 conference games. Now, the Sun Belt's been fine with 8, but now that you've got 14, I have no idea if that's a discussion that Keith Gill and the athletic directors and the presidents have had, if the Sun Belt eventually goes to 9 conference games. That way you'd be able to, perchance, see Southern Miss a little bit more, but being that they are in the West, like we talked about with Troy. Troy's a team that Georgia Southern's played every year since coming into the Sun Belt, but now that's not going to be the case anymore. You'll play everybody on your side, but on the West, you're only going to see 2 of those 7 teams in that rotation.
By the way, JT Crabtree, our buddy down at South Alabama, is saying we are really going to enjoy John Cox at Southern Miss. He has a couple stories, apparently. But we move on to Old Dominion, coming over from Conference USA that they joined in 2012. And they've had a lot of change around the Old Dominion athletic department in the last couple of years. They added volleyball for the 2020 season. They announced it back in 2017, had a couple of years to get it going, but officially started playing in 2020. They discontinued wrestling in April of 2020, and it wasn't technically because of the pandemic, but it was pandemic aided, I think you could say. But before we get into basketballs, baseballs, the other sports, this football program is something that fascinates me. I don't know why, but I went down a rabbit hole today, and you know how dangerous that can get.
Well, there's a lot of tie-ins between the two, the way that they began.
Right. They played 1 year as an independent as they transitioned to FBS in 2013, became full Conference USA in 2014. They tried to resurrect the program a couple of different times over the years after they stopped football in 1941.
Ironic.
Right. So, a relatively young program. They restarted it back in 2009, first 2 years as an unaffiliated team, quote-unquote, as Bobby Wilder restarted the program. They joined the Colonial in 2011. They played 2 years as an FCS school. The 2 years they played them, or the 2 years that they played as an FCS, Georgia Southern ended their season in the playoffs. 2011, they defeated Norfolk State 35-18 in the first round when they were ranked number 10, and then they took on the number 3 Georgia Southern team, lost 55-48. Georgia Southern beat Old Dominion.
Quarterback by the name of Taylor Heineke.
Right.
You may remember.
Yep. 2012 comes around. The first round, they play Coastal Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a whole lot of defense that day. 63-35, the final score. Norfolk State just obliterates Coastal Carolina. Move on. Who do they play in the second round? Georgia Southern. This is the year that Ryan Chambers loves to talk about.
2012.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because ODU was number 3 in the rankings. Georgia Southern was number 6. And I think this is the story that Chambers says that they asked them to leave their credentials on the table after the game because they would need them the next week. And I didn't know it until we had Chambers on a couple of weeks ago. A couple months ago now. But this is also when they had put Georgia State radio on the credentials. I didn't realize that until he told us. Mm-hmm. But Georgia Southern took care of ODU 49-35, and I think Chambers still has that credential. So both years that ODU was a part of the FCS days, Georgia Southern ended their season in the playoffs.
That 2012 game, Georgia Southern was down 14 going into the fourth quarter. They scored 28 points. Jarek McKinnon had 3 touchdowns. They had a fourth down stop, forced a turnover. It's kind of known in Norfolk as the collapse because they really felt that was going to be the year that they won the national championship, that being 2012. Georgia Southern ends up going up to the Fargo Dome and falling just short and getting back to the FCS national championship. But just like with James Madison, there is history, but it's a lot more recent history.
Yeah.
Bobby Wilder stepping aside a couple of years ago. Ricky Ronnie is the head coach now. He was the OC for James Franklin at Penn State. They didn't start last year very well. They were 1-6, but then they won their last 5 to get to bowl eligibility. They've made some renovations. They've sunk some money into Ballard Stadium, so it no longer looks like the side of a ship behind one of the end zones. But still, that's one of the more challenging places to go to because it's relatively compact, and it's not in terms of having a ton of people, but they pack them in pretty tightly.
Really? Sunk a lot of money into it so it doesn't look like a ship?
Well, I was up there in 2013 for that year. That was the famed 59-58 game against the Citadel.
Oh.
I was up there that year.
Sorry.
Missed a 2-point conversion in the final seconds, lost by 1.
Yikes.
Still the craziest football game I've ever seen.
But again, Old Dominion ended up becoming FBS in 2013, transitioning in 2013, I should say. They were full Conference USA members in 2014. But this is a basketball team that I didn't realize was as prominent as they are.
Very good.
12 NCAA tournaments on the men's side, 25 NCAA tournaments on the women's side. They made it to the Sweet 16 when they lost to UConn. A lot of people can say that back in 2008 on the women's side. But men's basketball last made it to the NCAA tournament in 2019, and they are really, really good at home. The Ted Constant Convocation Center, they are 109-27 the last 6 years, and they average about 5,000 to 6,000 in home games.
And that's where I was heading, because it's not just them, but it's also Marshall.
Yeah.
At the Henderson Center, they average more than 5,000. Nobody in the conference men's basketball, and don't mean this to sound a certain way, but nobody in the conference, even the Cajun Dome, don't touch those numbers.
No.
So those two are going to come in, lead the league in attendance for sure. But Old Dominion has had a lot of basketball success on the men's side. On the women's side, 80s and 90s, they were one of the best programs in the country.
Yeah. Baseball side, they've been to 9 NCAA regional appearances. 1996, they were in the Atlantic Regional when they lost to Georgia Southern and to Clemson, who was hosting that year.
That's right.
And I didn't realize this, but Justin Verlander, an ODU alum, along with Daniel Hudson, pitched for the Nationals and for the Cardinals for a short stint, I think. But Old Dominion, rather, has 10 NCAA team national championships, all on the women's side, 1 for basketball in 1985, and then 9 titles, the most recent coming in 2000 for field hockey. So you're on a pretty good field hockey side of things here for the Sun Belt.
Nobody's going to be playing pickup field hockey with the Virginia school.
No, forget that noise. Move on to our final school that is joining the Sunbelt Conference this year, and that is Marshall. This is one that you and I have talked about.
I love this one.
Really excited. There's so much history. Went on with the ESPN station up in Huntington, West Virginia a couple of weeks ago, and you want to talk about people that are fired up for Georgia Southern to be joining. This is one that I know Appalachian State is the rival for Georgia Southern, but I think this is one that there's enough history here that it's not going to take too long for Georgia Southern and Marshall to become rivals as well. 2-time FCS national champions in 92 and 96, 18 bowl appearances. They've appeared in a bowl each of the last 5 years. Just from the football side, and we'll get to the other sports in just a few minutes, but from a football side, this is one that I cannot wait for Georgia Southern and Marshall to match up every year.
They'll be coming down here, second to last home game of the season. Georgia Southern gets to stack Marshall and App State to end the season, which that's a way to finish up 2022 in Clay Helton's first year. They're getting brand new turf. I believe it just got installed up at Edwards Stadium in Huntington, and they're selling pieces of the other turf, and the proceeds, I believe, are going to charity. So a really nice job by the Marshall Athletic Department to get into a venture like that. They've had a lot of success. Charles Huff is the head coach. He was on Nick Saban's staff at Alabama for a spell. Rasheen Ali is one of the top running backs in the country. He can catch the ball. He can run. He's going to be a terror for defenses in this league to stop. They do lose their quarterback. Great Wells transferring to Virginia Tech, so there's a decision to be made about who is going to take the snaps. But as far as being a program, that 1996 team came to Statesboro. Randy Moss had 2 touchdowns at Paulson Stadium. They ended up winning the national championship. They played in a national championship in this stadium in 1991 when they lost to Youngstown. That's when Georgia Southern had the bid for 3 years, 89, 90, and 91, to host the then 1AA national championship. And to be able to delve into that history even more about the tragic crash, this was the 50-year anniversary of that, to be able to learn more about why Huntington, and it's a small town right on the water in West Virginia. It's a blue-collar town, very similar to Statesboro. Going to be able to learn a lot more about that and how that town has embraced that and why they feel the way they do, not just about football, but about Thundering Herd athletics as a whole.
On the men's basketball side, they have appeared in 6 NCAA tournaments. The last was 2018. That was the first since 1987. It's a lot of history on the basketball side for Marshall. First season in 1907. That was a year after Georgia Southern was founded as a university or as a college at the time. But began notoriety under head coach Cam Henderson, the father of the fast break in the 2-3 zone from 35 to 55. Women's basketball has struggled in the last couple of years, especially just 1 NCAA tournament appearance. But there's a lot of talk around Huntington that the move to the Sun Belt and just the fact of who you're bringing in as far as teams to Huntington, because you've talked about it, Huntington really likes basketball for whatever reason.
The whole state of West Virginia, high school basketball, big in West Virginia.
But just becoming a member of the Sunbelt Conference, they really feel like is going to help recruiting-wise. And it's going to take a couple of years for their women's basketball team to get rolling. Yeah. But this is one that they're really excited about, that the move helps the team, which I don't think you hear very often.
They defeated the Ragin' Cajuns up in Huntington during non-conference play. I think Louisiana had They either had 28 or 30 turnovers that game, but Marshall ended up pulling away late for a double-digit victory. On the baseball side, not a whole lot of success because they don't have an on-campus stadium. But the announcement came out not too long ago. They're going to be getting that supposedly within the next few years, about a $20 million venture. They had to delay that because there were a number of other renovations that needed to take place on campus for various other sports, but it finally looks like they also just got a new athletic director. Christian Spears was hired right before their move to the Sun Belt was announced. So this is going to be one of his big pushes, but it looks like they're finally going to get that on-campus baseball stadium.
Yeah, and it looks like kind of aiming for that 2024 season range. And this was odd to me because right now they're using either the Kennedy Center Field in Huntington or the local minor, I say local, it's in the next town over, local minor league park in Appalachian Power Park in Charleston, home of the West Virginia Power.
A park I know very,
I was about to say,
well.
Didn't you start your career there? Second stop?
Well, they're in the South Atlantic League, so when I was with the Charleston River Dogs, had a chance to see a couple series there. I saw my first no-hitter there.
Huh.
Got no hit that night.
Who threw it?
Hunter Strickland threw the first 6, Diego Moreno threw the next 3.
Like San Francisco Giants, Hunter Strickland?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
That was before he started throwing 100 miles per hour.
Yeah.
At that point, because he was originally a Red Sox farmhand, and he had come up. He was back and forth. He was doing some starting. He was out of the bullpen a little bit. Then he got traded to the Pirates organization, and Starling Marte was on that team. And at that point, the fastest center fielder I'd ever seen. He caught everything. He hit everything that weekend. But he started that game, and they wore alternate uniforms. They were the West Virginia Power, but they had Charlies on their jerseys that night because back in the 70s, they were the Charleston Charlies. So they threw a no-hitter, a combined no-hitter against the River Dogs that night wearing alternate uniforms.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But they have 4 national championships from the NCAA, 2 of them on the football side in 92 and 96, as we mentioned. 2020, they had the men's soccer national championship.
Yeah.
And then basketball won it in 1947. And that's something that I think gets lost with these 4 teams coming into the Sunbelt Conference. We talked about it with John Murphy a couple of weeks ago. But with these 4 teams, 3 of the 4 having soccer, and you look at a team like Marshall, who just, oh, by the way, a couple of years ago won the national championship, you're getting Sunbelt men's soccer back. And, oh, by the way, it just became one of the top men's soccer leagues in the nation because you also add a team like South Carolina, you add Kentucky, you add West Virginia, now UCF getting in the mix the last couple of weeks it being announced. They're going to be joining men's soccer for Sunbelt only, or the Sunbelt and men's soccer only in the 2023 season. But this is a really good move. We've talked about it. Adding these 4 makes a lot of sense in a lot of different realms of the scope of athletics. But you get to sponsor another sport, and it's a sport that John Murphy worked really hard to get it going the first time.
Yeah.
You didn't have it last year when Georgia Southern and Georgia State had to play in the MAC. That didn't work. And so you get Sunbelt Conference soccer back, and that's a huge addition to this league.
You go from a situation where you barely had a league with schools like Hartwick and Howard, which aren't easy to travel to, but you're able to not only get Georgia Southern, Georgia State back into men's soccer in this conference, but you had 3 Power 5 schools.
Yeah.
John Murphy's got to be really happy about that.
Oh, no doubt. And a lot of people are like, how is South Carolina, Kentucky becoming... The SEC does not sponsor men's soccer for whatever reason. There's a lot of schools that don't have men's soccer with Title IX issues and different things with the scholarship numbers and whatnot. SEC does not sponsor men's soccer. And if I'm not mistaken, Kentucky and South Carolina were in Conference USA before coming over to the Sunbelt Conference as far as men's soccer is concerned. But we talked about it this past Thursday with John Murphy. This is probably the second best league as far as men's soccer is concerned. ACC is always going to run rampant with Clemson and Boston College and clubs like that, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities that the Sun Belt is the second best men's soccer league in the country.
And at least for a frame of reference, Georgia Southern just played West Virginia.
Right.
So at least you've got that, and you're not completely jumping in to the deep end of the pool. You at least have an idea of what's coming into this league.
So the 4 newbies to the Sunbelt Conference, officially members of the SBC: James Madison, Southern Miss, Old Dominion, and Marshall. I think I already know the answer to this, but which one are you most excited for?
Marshall.
That's what I thought.
There are parts about all four that I'm pretty stoked about, but Marshall is one that has been rumored for a while, and then it escalated a little bit last year, but this past season when they played that Thursday night game in Boone against Appalachian State, because you got Sean Clark talking about the Southern Conference rivalry. He played in that rivalry. He and Scott Satterfield were on the same team whenever they were going back and forth, and App had its undefeated season. Marshall, of course, winning its national championship in '96. But that expedited that because everybody said, well, Marshall should just be in the Sunbelt. At that point, we didn't know that Conference USA was going to completely change, and we knew what was going to happen with the SEC, with Oklahoma and Texas deciding what they were going to do. But now Conference USA looking at a substantial change, the American a substantial change, the news from just a couple of days ago with USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten, maybe the Big 12 taking as many as 6 Pac-12 schools within the next couple of years. We're trending towards super conferences. I don't know what that's going to mean for the Sun Belt, but while everybody is reaching out, tentacles are going as far as they can to get all of these different schools, yes, the Sun Belt added, but this is about as good as you can feel for a conference that has not played a game with 14 teams. I feel great about where the Sun Belt is and where the Sun Belt's heading.
No, for sure, and we've talked about it a lot that you had the American Conference USA look completely different than what they did 2-3 years ago. And yes, they quote-unquote replaced the teams that they lost, but after everything comes out in the shuffle, and like you mentioned, there's still a lot of shuffling that's going to happen over the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But as of right now, I think the Sun Belt comes out of this smelling like roses because, one, the Sun Belt didn't panic, and they took the time they needed to get the schools in that they needed to, and they went after programs, one, with history, two, that fit the geographic footprint. That's been a huge talking point across the Sunbelt Conference ever since Georgia Southern and App joined the league. And you're not going after just big media markets where the teams may or may not be competing.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what the American and Conference USA went after, and you can say it's right, you can say it's wrong, but from the on-the-field standpoint and strengthening the on-field product, I think the Sunbelt Conference comes out of this smelling like roses.
You've got a 14-team league where everybody plays football, so there's no, okay, Idaho's only in as a football member, New Mexico State's only in as a football member, UT Arlington and Little Rock are in the league for everything except football.
Yeah.
Now everybody is on the same page with the most important sport. Football has taken a step forward. Baseball has taken a step forward. Men's basketball will be the next to see the investments go up. And getting 2 teams in the league like a Marshall and an Old Dominion where attendance is more than 5,000 a night, which by far would have the standard in this league, that's going to tell people need to start spending more money. Old Dominion, Marshall, with James Madison just opening its new arena, Southern Miss going to be going out in the West. They've got to think, okay, we can handle ourselves on the baseball diamond. No doubt about that. Football, we have more than enough experience with success not all that long ago. I do think Will Hall is the right guy there. They just need to improve their recruiting, and eventually they'll see the results on the field. But now that everybody is doing things the same way, well, let me recycle that. You've got 14 different ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
2 teams are coming in this league, have more money than anybody else. So they're going to think that puts them in the best spot with Old Dominion and James Madison. But everybody is going to have to realize what Georgia Southern recognized within these last 2 years. The way that you improve is by investment, both with sweat equity and with money. You've got to get creative in ways to find that, and you've also got to get creative in ways to bring in student athletes, to improve your recruiting, to improve your resources. That's why with Georgia Southern, they finally have the fueling station over at the TED. You're going to see a lot more change at Georgia Southern, with other teams in this league, and for the Sun Belt as a whole. There's a lot of stability, and it's one of the few leagues in this entire country that can say we are stable right now, that we did not get hurt by realignment. We got a lot stronger by realignment, but the amount of changes that we have seen, it's only beginning.
And I think a lot of people will say you don't necessarily want to bring in teams that like you mentioned, JMU and ODU being the top 2 athletic budgets coming into the Sunbelt Conference. I like that because, one, you're bringing in people that obviously have made a commitment to all of their athletic programs, and you're saying if you're going to be competitive in this league and be competitive right away, this is what you've got to do. And it almost holds your schools that are in right now, and Jared Benko talked about it earlier on in a couple of Benko briefings ago, that, look, this is what we're going up against. This is where we need to be. This is what you have to do to compete at this level. And I like that half of the teams that you're bringing in are at the top of your conference as far as athletic budget.
That is the whole basis of the ticket modernization plan that went out during the spring. That's why We Need You is a concept, but it's as much as everybody else looking around, look at what you've done. If you can do more, fantastic. But just be willing to step up and help Georgia Southern get to where we all feel that Eagle Nation should be. That's what it boils down to.
That is our wrap-up of the 4 new teams in the Sunbelt Conference, a brand new Sunbelt Conference after, we'll call it phase 1 of the conference realignment and shuffling.
No more logo changes, though. Let's keep the logo.
It's only a matter of time.
I think Kara Ritchie for Arkansas State is she's big about tracking the Sunbelt logos from where, because Sunbelt's only been a league officially football-wise for 20 years.
Yeah, and heck, Kara's probably seen all of them.
But let's keep the logo the same.
Before we wrap up this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation, we promised it to you last week, but you just returned from your trip out west.
I saw some cacti.
Saw some cacti, some mules.
Saw some jackrabbits.
You did a touchdown call on, what was it, Devil's Bridge?
Devil's Bridge, yes it was.
So how was it?
Well, I got to think about heights, so that one took a little bit. But
I'm not going to lie. When I saw that on social media, I was like, he's not comfortable.
It was worse getting down from where we climbed up to than it was climbing up to it, if that makes any sense.
Okay, yeah.
But I looked at where this bridge was. I mean, it's not a suspension bridge.
Right.
But it was just a flat rock over top of an opening. And I'm looking at it from the side and thinking, okay, that doesn't look very wide. That looks awfully narrow. She said, you got to walk at least into it. She said, okay, I'll go do it. And then once I saw her, I was like, okay, I'm already up here. Never going to get a chance to be up here again, probably. Walk over to see it. And I realize, okay, there's a lot more space on this than, because you see it from a right angle. There's no way I'm going to be able to walk on this thing. I'm going to fall off, and that's going to be it. But I get out to the point I did, and she said, you got to do wings up. I said, okay. So she had the video on. I did wings up. But the getting down off of that part of the hike in Sedona was not as hard going up as it was going down, because the way that the rocks were formed, it was close quarters. But getting to do that was one of the coolest things I've ever been able to do.
So, did the Grand Canyon,
which was, they got the name right. I'm sure everybody's made that joke, but they got the name right.
Was that when you rode the mule?
Yes, rode mules around the south rim of the Grand Canyon.
How about that? So you had a very nice Airbnb overlooking the desert with sunset, sunrise.
In Scottsdale as part of the Sonoran Desert. Ended up having to do a little bit more driving, but to be in the middle of the desert and have the kind of views that we did, it was pretty, watching the sunrise and sunset there. I would highly recommend it if you get the chance.
Made it to Winslow, Arizona.
Well, we thought we were going to be able to. I didn't realize where it was located, but I'll share this. I've got a big thing about streets and roads.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by maps and streets and roads and highways. I love where highways go, because the odd numbers are north-south, and the east numbers or the even numbers are east-west. I love streets. I love roads, interstate highways, and all that. So I've had this fascination.
Yeah, I travel with them. You'll pick that up.
Got to be. I've been fascinated by Route 66. I never had a chance to be on it because it got decommissioned about 50 years ago. But going out to Winslow, I never realized that Route 66 went through there. So we actually had a chance to drive through it and on it. And when we went to Flagstaff, we saw part of it as well. But when they decommissioned the highway in Winslow, when I-40 cut through it, Winslow at one point was a pretty significant town in the state of Arizona. But it hadn't been that way for 50 years ever since that happened. I think it got decommissioned in 79. But the reason to go there was to see the statue. There's a number of statues on this street corner because it's part of the Eagles song that is, ironically, 50 years old. Take it easy.
Huh.
And the guy that wrote it never knew this. Her and I started digging up some information as we were driving back. Jackson Browne wrote the song. And it ended up getting tinkered with by the Eagles. He came up with the line about standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona, because I think at some point he had gotten stranded there. He was just passing through. He was driving on 66, but he had gotten stranded there, and he didn't know how to finish the line. So I think it was Glenn Fry that came in and said the line about the flatbed Ford, and it just came out so cool. It was so natural, and that was the big hook that made it one of the most popular songs the Eagles ever put out.
All right, before we wrap this one up, you also, of course, have to tie in the Georgia Southern connection. There always is one. But you guys...
We had two Georgia Southern connections.
Okay. Well, the one I'm talking about is aided by Chad Willis.
Oh, yeah. So there's a... Sorso Wine Room is located in Scottsdale, and it's owned and operated by the Tians. Mark Tian, you remember, played third base in the big leagues for 12 years, played with the Royals and the White Sox, among others. His wife, Lauren Tian, the former Lauren McLean, was the 2001 Southern Conference Volleyball Player of the Year at Georgia Southern. So they tried to set it up for when men's golf was out there for the NCAA tournament. But we said we were going out there. We'd be happy to drop in. We'd love to be able to see them. They're on vacation. They're finishing up a vacation over in Europe. But they knew that we were coming in, and that was awesome. They, not just with the selection they had, the food was delicious, the atmosphere. They were playing trivia that night.
Did you win?
We helped a team off to the right of us. We weren't supposed to do that, but we helped a team that was sitting next to us. No, we just aided. We aided them in their quest to win a...
You illegally aided.
There were no rules because we got there when trivia was halfway through, so we didn't know what the rules were. We looked over a couple of times, okay. But we didn't get a chance to meet them because they were overseas. But if their staff is any reflection of who they are as people, any chance out west, if you get a chance to go through Scottsdale Sorso Wine Room, it was fantastic.
Okay, your other Georgia Southern connection. Is this the ULM guy?
Okay, 3. So we were hiking the Grand Canyon. We get to one of the stops. I don't know if it was the second stop or the initial stop, but met the former equipment manager for ULM football.
Huh.
Big Nick White fan because
yeah.
Who isn't? So we talked with him for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then the last connection was because we missed our connection in Dallas-Fort Worth on Sunday. The flight out of Phoenix got delayed, so we had to spend the night in the greater Dallas area, and just a shot in the dark, seeing if we could...
By the way, you and I don't have great luck in Dallas with planes and connections.
And her and I talked about that quite a bit, but this time it wasn't Dallas's fault. Last 2 times it was Dallas's fault. This time it wasn't Dallas's fault.
I never want to go to DFW again.
So took a shot thinking, you know what? We didn't get a chance to see our buddy from UTA, Josh Sowers, with the final baseball series because that's where the Mavericks ended their Sunbelt Conference baseball membership. They didn't participate in the tournament, didn't get a chance to catch up in Montgomery, so we just took a shot at He was working camera at the Frisco's Rough Riders game that night, but it worked out. We ended up spending a couple of hours together, and now that he's out there in the WAC, he is officially we have let the bird fly. But that was a really special night, being able to spend a little bit of time with him.
Ah, she brings another Georgia Southern connection into this. The ULM former equipment manager is now at Akron with Andy Kwan.
Yes, that's right. And when that came up, I had totally forgotten that Andy Kwan was at Akron.
Yeah, until she just said it, I forgot it.
We talked about that for a couple minutes, and then he ends up going to spend some time with Nick Saban in Alabama. Now, of course, an assistant coach working with tight ends at Arkansas State. They're not on the schedule this year, but Andy's going to be a star in coaching, and it's funny, you can go that far across the country and still find people that are associated with Georgia Southern or the Sun Belt, or some way, somehow met a Georgia Southern grad from back in 2013. That was right as we were starting the hike up in Sedona, and we ran into a family from Augusta girl that runs track at Augusta University. So we talked about Dr. Keel for a minute. We talked about basketball with David Vitti and Tyshawn Crawford having transferred there and playing for national championship this past year. So there were apparently a lot of people that we didn't know we were going to know. I'll put it that way.
How about that?
Yeah. It was whole week was just awesome.
Glad you had fun. And Jared talks about it a lot. Chris Davis talks about it too in different all-staff meetings, that the summer you've got to get away. I don't know that they necessarily meant that far away, but...
Yeah, dog, you ain't got to go that far.
Yeah.
You can do a staycation if you want to.
But just get away, recharge, come back. Are you refreshed?
Fresh as can be.
There it is.
But going through Flagstaff a couple of times, hit a couple of breakfast spots thanks to William at Southern Exchange for Macy's Coffee House. It was wonderful.
Ron White enjoys Flagstaff.
I've heard that. We wanted to stop by Northern Arizona to see their football dome, but we didn't have a chance to do that. We were on the way to the airport that morning.
Nah. You'll get it next trip.
But you traveled as well this weekend?
Yeah. I just made a little quick stop up through Nashville.
It's not quick.
7 hours. Well, the way we do it, it's quick.
Yeah, some of the way. Oh, okay. Everybody else in the league now, those are long trips, so that might be in one of the shorter
forget
trips.
that noise. Yeah, made them way up to Nashville, and then on the way back, got to catch up with a couple of good folks. Wiley Ballard up in Atlanta, the voice of Georgia Tech baseball, also does sidelines for Georgia Tech football. Got to catch up with him over lunch, and then some people that I know you really enjoy. Got to catch up with the coaching staff for the Atlanta Crackers summer ball team.
You saw Kevin?
I did.
Oh, God.
Kevin Meisticle, one of the best baseball minds you're going to run across.
I love Kevin.
Steve Autry, the pitching guru is what I call him. Brad Etheridge, the hitting coach. And, I don't know if I've told you this, the coach this is a team in the Sunbelt Summer League, a great history of the Atlanta Crackers. There's a story on sunbeltleague.com. Stop and think what the website was. sunbeltleague.com. Goes into Kevin Meisticle and Luke Appling going down to the Atlanta Historical Society, finding the history of the Atlanta Crackers, resurrecting the name. It's not based off the Negro League team. The Atlanta Black Crackers, a completely separate team that was a minor league team and semi-pro team in the day down at Ponce de Leon Stadium. But also, the coach that I worked with a good bit, Gil Navarro, who was with the Marietta Patriots, is now on staff for the Atlanta Crackers. That's a one-stop shop right there of good people. Did you ever go to the barn?
Yeah, we went to the barn.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. It felt like it was a museum.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Holding Willie Stargell's bat is one of the cooler because one of the teams Kevin played for when he pitched was for the Pirates. So getting a chance to hold Willie Stargell's bat is one of the cooler things I've seen.
Yeah, Kevin Meisticle, who is the owner and manager of the Atlanta Crackers, he is one of the best baseball minds out there, in really good shape now too. He's had a couple knee replacements, but really good shape. He has a barn outside his house in Swanee that I think Cooperstown would blush at. He's got jerseys from Stan Musial. He's got Willie Stargell's bat. He's got all kinds of stuff packed into this barn, and you are not going to go there and spend less than 2-3 hours.
Teal College's finest, Kevin Meisticle.
That's right. I forgot y'all bonded over your...
Same. I went to Waynesburg, Teal College. They share the President's Athletic Conference D3 League up in Pennsylvania. So once he said, "Yeah, I went to Teal," because I never met anybody else outside of when I was at Waynesburg that went to Teal. I said, "You went to where?" I went to Waynesburg, and that just about floored him.
Yeah, because whenever somebody asks him where he went to school, he says Teal College, and everybody's like, "Who?"
Yeah.
So I think the fact that you knew what Teal College was, he was pretty impressed
Well,
at.
if you don't know, you think it's Thiel.
Right.
First time, this has been 15 years now, but I first saw it.
Thiel,
Yeah.
I think.
You see it the first time, you think, okay, that's Thiel. No, what? No, Teal. Greensboro, Pennsylvania.
How about that?
Beautiful campus. Really nice campus.
So got to see Wiley, got to see Kevin, Brad, Steve, Gil. Got to see my folks for a couple hours too.
Oh.
Good to see them.
Oh, I got to see that too.
Yeah. I mean, that's not the throw-in, but good to see them this weekend.
That's a good weekend.
That's one heck of a weekend.
We did all right.
Yeah. We'll see how we top it this week. I don't know that we can. You had to stop and think about it for a minute.
I was thinking about if we could. That's going to be tough. But you had fun, I had fun, and we get a chance to have the little downtime that we do. We've got Sunbelt Conference Football Media Day where we get a chance to see all 14 teams over a 2-day event coming up here in just a few weeks. So that's, I guess, our unofficial launch into next season, but getting a chance to do these each week. And you've seen some of the content we put out on Twitter with a rehash of Rogers Eagle Tales. I think that's gone over really well so far. There's a number of other things that we're going to be doing to get you charged up for football season, including this being the 40th anniversary of the football program going into the NCAA. So we've got some things planned for that too.
Yeah, and if I've had a couple of people text me, I feel like I've heard this story before. You have. They were a part of the podcast back a couple of years ago, but rehashing, these are things that will never get old. Well, they're old, but the story will never get old. And so being able to put these back out in different ways, reach different folks.
And being that we are still just short of 2 months away from the start of football season, this can whet your appetite just enough before the pads start popping sometime in August.
And anytime Roger speaks, people listen.
Got to.
Oh, no doubt.
Got to.
No doubt. But, again, anything that you want to hear, let us know about, and we will be able to try to get it as close to the way you want it as possible. But until next week, for the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.